Representative Omar, oh boy, she was all over this issue. She said we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, completely. Because here's the thing, there's a cancer. The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten to the root, and so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer.
I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
Wish we had the defund the ATF bill up this week if I ran the police.
But wait a minute, Mr. Gaetz. Wait, I have a minute left. I know this is painful, but I've got to get some of these zingers in here because...
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
On
February, that was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not.
We have the receipt, y'all. Don't try to bring this argument in here again. I got a lot more, but I'm out of time. It just goes on and on. Representative Omar, oh boy, she was all over this issue. She said we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, completely. Because here's the thing, there's a cancer. The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten to the root, and so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer. I'm really sad to have to do this again, but our colleagues on the other side just pretend as though the last couple of years didn't occur, and that almost everyone on the other side there didn't make openly public statements repeatedly that indeed they wanted to defund the police, while all of us on this side were fighting for law enforcement, supporting local, state, and federal law enforcement, and doing everything we could to shore up confidence and the protection of those who are out serving on the front lines for us. Let me just give you a sampling of some of their comments, because it's been said here that these are quote-unquote cheap talking points. I'll just start with the calls from Chairman Jerry Nadler. He publicly agreed with reducing the New York Police Department budget, which I think was cut by, I don't know, something like $1 billion or something. He said, quote, there should be substantial cuts to the police budget and a reallocation of those funds to where we need them, unquote. Representative Jayapal used different language to support defunding the police, and she said, quote, it is completely reasonable for us to shift significant resources from law enforcement and investing in people, unquote. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries certainly expressed an openness to defunding the police. He said on CNN, quote, you have to look at that on a case-by-case basis, you know, city by city. Former Representative, now Mayor Karen Bass, who used to be on the committee, stated calls to defund the police, quote, can be used as a distraction, yet she supported, quote, the intent behind the messaging. Again, these are their own words, y'all. Representative Bowman, on March 17, 2021, he tweeted this, quote, too many police in our country are more concerned with protecting white supremacy than serving the communities that pay their salaries. Then he tweeted, we don't need police with lethal weapons carrying out routine traffic stops. Reallocate police funding to unarmed traffic forces to remove even the possibility of state-sanctioned manslaughter, unquote. Representative Cori Bush, boy, she has pages and pages of this, but she said, and by the way, she was vice chair of the crime subcommittee in the last Congress. She tweeted, it's not a slogan, it's a mandate for keeping our people alive. Defund the police, in all caps. Then she said that funding the police is not the problem, that's the solution, and we have to do that to invest in our communities. I'll keep going because I got some more time. AOC, Congressman.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'm happy to yield.
The gentleman that the person that Democrats chose to chair the crime subcommittee.
You heard that right.
Said that it was a mandate to defund the police. And now, on Police Week, when the majority is seeking to simply pass a resolution honoring the police, we are being accused of taking cheap shots at Democrats when not any Democrat, literally the person they put in charge of the crime sub, is that what I'm to understand?
That is indeed.
And I have an inquiry. Is Ms. Bush still on the Judiciary Committee?
We haven't seen her.
No, but it's an honest question. Is she on the?
She has a tag down there.
Well, I mean, I'd say it would be great, Mr. Chairman, if we had the benefit of Ms. Bush in committee so as to allow her to espouse these views and subject them to debate.
Would
and
the
clash
gentleman
and
yield?
criticism?
No, it's my time.
I'm sorry, I'll yield back to Mr. Johnson.
Well,
but
I
will gladly, upon the opportunity to take time, engage in a colloquy on
I
this.
just want to ask about your
mystifying
ATF
subject.
defund.
Well, no, hold on.
Totally for it. Wish we had the defund the ATF bill up this week if I ran the police.
But wait a minute,
Feel free.
Mr. Gaetz. Wait, I have a minute left. I know this is painful, but I've got to get some of these zingers in here because Representative Ocasio-Cortez said after they cut $1 billion from New York's police department, she said, quote, that didn't go far enough. Defunding police means defunding police. Representative Mondaire Jones, said that a suite of criminal justice reforms to redress racial inequalities and harms in our justice system, including defunding police, reinvesting this money, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on and on. Representative Omar, oh boy, she was all over this issue. She said we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, completely. Because here's the thing, there's a cancer. The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten to the root, and so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer. Representative Ayanna Pressley said, the defund isn't new. Folks are just finally listening. We got monies for war, but we can't feed the poor. Tlaib, I'll end with this. She said, when we say hashtag defund the police, what we mean is people are dying and we need to invest in people's livelihoods instead. Listen, we have the receipts, y'all. Don't try to bring this argument in here again. I got a lot more, but I'm out of time.
I would just note for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are former prosecutors, you well know that the opinions of a journalist don't amount to actual evidence of anything. And it is a sign of the desperate attempt to satisfy your conspiracy theories that you're bringing a fringe right
Gentleman's out of
reporter
time.
to provide evidence of for your investigation. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Johnson from Louisiana.
I'm so grateful for that segue from Mr. Golden because we're about to talk about hard evidence here. It's really ironic this hearing is covering the left's censorship of opposing viewpoints, and you've all seen it on display all day long. They've been doing exactly that. They've been trying to bully and defame our witnesses and try to cover up their opinions. They actually began the hearing with a motion to prevent them from testifying. You can't make this stuff up. It's on broad display for everybody. They did the same thing yesterday in the hearing with the IRS whistleblowers. You know why? Because the Democrats are panicked right now. They're panicked because it's impossible to cover up the inescapable conclusions of the last few weeks. Let me give you two of them. First, one, the hard evidence, Mr. Goldman and everybody else, now proves that the Biden family is hopelessly corrupt and has apparently engaged in a long pattern of extortion, bribery, influence peddling, and tax fraud and staggering abuses of power. And number two, we're highlighting here today that we now know that a growing list of the most important executive branch agencies of the Biden administration are in on it. They've also been corrupted. They've been weaponized to help cover all this up, the first family's crimes. When we summarize all this stuff, it sounds like a premise of a dystopian novel or something, but it's actually happening right now on our watch. This is not conspiracy theories, this is evidence. Our hearing today is to put a spotlight on one more of these incredible avenues of unprecedented corruption and government cover-up. And here again, a federal court has just affirmed all that hard evidence. It proves that the White House, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, among other agencies, threatened and coerced the social media platforms to censor and suppress disfavored viewpoints and conservatives' social media posts online. I'm grateful we have with us today two individuals, Mr. Kennedy and Ms. Harris, who were directly impacted by that censorship, and the third, Mr. Sauer, who we're about to speak with, serving as lead counsel in the landmark lawsuit against the federal government on this issue. Let's talk facts. The American people are not aware of the magnitude of this case, Mr. Sauer, and its profound implications because most of the mainstream media is in on it too, and they're trying to bury the story. In brief, in May of last year, the attorneys general of my state, Louisiana, and the state of Missouri filed suit in U.S. District Court of the Western District of Louisiana. This blatant censorship. They went after the blatant censorship by the Biden White House in 9 of its federal agencies. 2 weeks ago on Independence Day, the district court issued a truly extraordinary 155-page court opinion, a ruling granting the plaintiff's request for preliminary injunction. Mr. Sauer, your lead counsel in that litigation. You referenced some in your opening statement, but let's do it again here because they don't seem to be paying attention. Can you give a summary again of some of the key components of that opinion and the basis for it? I know you mentioned there were 82 pages of detailed factual findings, right?
That is correct. 82 pages, 577 citations of the record evidence. That evidence is drawn from about 20,000 pages of the government's own communications with social media platforms and 6 full-length depositions of senior federal officials with firsthand knowledge of federal censorship practices.
It's absolutely staggering. And now they've tried to bury this and say, well, the Fifth Circuit entered a temporary administrative stay. They granted an expedited briefing and oral argument, however, for August 10th. What's the impact of that? Isn't that routine practice in the Fifth Circuit?
That's a direct quote from the recent Fifth Circuit decision, N. Ray Abbott, which is cited in my written testimony. It's legally incorrect. Clearly legally ascribe them as vacating the injunction, which has happened multiple times.
They either don't know the law or, I don't know, they're trying to obscure the facts. That's a theme around here. The White House and the fellow Democrats disputed almost none of the factual findings in the court. Isn't that right?
So far, we've had 2 emergency stay motions from the Department of Justice, one in the district court, one in the Court of Appeals. And what really struck me in reading those is they just don't dispute those 82 pages of factual findings. Almost none of them are directly disputed in what they've filed so far.
So at the very beginning of this lengthy opinion, the court explains the staggering scope of the government censorship uncovered here. At page 2, the court explains, quote, if the allegations made by the plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack on free speech in United States history. The court called it dystopian, Orwellian. How broad has this attack been? How many Americans have been censored, do you think?
There's judicial findings again and again in the opinion of millions of American voices silenced by the efforts.
And it had profound impacts. We know, we just saw the poll in the data that's been in facts, not conjecture, that it probably changed the outcome of the election. The court noted that they suppressed, among other topics, the Hunter Biden laptop story. And the court noted, not you, not me, not Republicans, that millions of Americans were not exposed to that story. Had they been, we know they might have voted differently. We'll never be able to unwind history, but wow, I mean, the profound impacts. What are some of the other categories of speech that the government suppressed with its unconstitutional scheme?
Well, the court made findings on that. I just quote them: opposition to COVID-19 vaccines, opposition to COVID-19 masking and lockdowns, the lab leak theory of COVID-19, opposition to President Biden's policies, statements that the Hunter Biden laptop story was true, opposition to the policies of government officials in power. All were suppressed. And that's just some examples, many other examples in the court's findings and discovery.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
On
February, that was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February
a witness
8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether you under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.